Hello, welcome to Permaculture Noosa and the Cooroy Community Gardens, and we're here with Sandra Tushinkar, and we're talking about climate change response gardens. Tushinkar is the expert in this. She's a PhD in fungal matter in our soils. So she's going to tell us about what we should be doing for climate change response and fungus.
Let's maybe start talking about why fungi is important in soils, because we've lost it basically. And this is good because this has got all the woody bits that are going to provide the food for the fungi. But basically fungal biomass means having fungi in the soil, and usually when we till and we apply agricultural chemicals, we basically kill them. So we want to restore them back because they play huge roles in feeding very important nutrients to plants, and really like creating soil structure, because they run on these hyphal networks, which are these cells very long, and they wrap around soil particles, create nice pores for water and oxygen to get in. So they create soil structure. They feed plants because when they get eaten by fungal feeding nematodes and other creatures that eat them, they release lots of nutrients and carbon into the soil, and the carbon really stays there because as they die, they literally are the carbon, and because they're very hard to decompose any further, they create humus, and that's your long-term carbon storage. So very much fungi can change the climate back if we allow them and support them to grow in our soils.
So one more time, let's go through, how does the carbon come out of the atmosphere and go into the
fungi?
In the fungi, yeah.
So yeah, through the photosynthetic process, so plants partner up with mycorrhizal fungi, so they're symbiotic fungi growing on their roots. And these guys really drive that root symbiotic relationship with plants and demand carbon or liquid carbon or sugar from plants. Really sugar it is, that's getting fixed by from the sunlight, carbon dioxide and water. And that carbon dioxide goes in, gets turned into liquid, gets demanded by the fungi because they want to eat it. And as the fungi take it down, they actually share it with all the other microbes. So there's many other microbes that actually, like bacteria, for example, they require that as well. They feed on the sugars that come from the plant. But the plant in return, through the symbiotic network, gets nutrients. So the fungi literally mine for the plant the nutrients the plant requires. And that's usually nitrogen, phosphorus, but all the vitamins as well, minerals that we can't really provide synthetically. So this is why it's so important to have the microbiome function in the soil, because they literally feed the plant the exact nutrients the plant demands.
So it sounds to me like we're talking about no-dig gardens, because I've heard that when you disrupt the soil, the carbon goes up. Where if you keep your soil down, you're not digging it up and releasing the carbon. Is that correct?
Yes, because every time you drive a tractor through or dig your soil up, you basically, if you're tilling or using machinery or even just any mechanical means, those fungal networks that are quite long cells, they get broken up. And the more you break them up over time, the more they struggle to survive and recreate their networks. So the more often that happens, like for example, once a year, every time you break down these networks because you're tilling, you then release that carbon from them because they die. And same with microbes, other microbes like bacteria. When they get chopped and turned, they become exposed to oxygen, so they sunlight, and they die. So it's all about protecting. Just like you can imagine that happens for millions of years in a forest situation. No one really, except for a few scratches by animals digging little holes for water infiltration. It all really stays there, and it functions without disturbance. And any disturbance that is produced, like ripping out trees, is going to set it back in succession. So we're literally kind of like over and over putting the soil back to the beginning of time by tilling it and changing its composition.
So here in the Cooroy Community Gardens, we have our food forest over there, but I'd like to walk you over to what we call the Olympic Gardens right here, because we're just stacking, and the idea is a no-dig garden. So let's walk over.
Area here,
Cool. And the idea is that in 10 years, the Olympics are going to be here. In 10 years, these garden beds are just going to be absolutely ripping. But unfortunately, I keep digging in them to look for, just to see how it's going, which I'm probably tearing it up. But was this a good idea for climate change response, just to keep stacking and putting plants on them, chopping and dropping and just letting them grow like that?
Absolutely. The chop and drop method works really well because you're creating organic matter that keeps feeding the microbes. So now the microbes are not only getting organic matter from the plants, there's also, just like in the forest, once again, it's the drop from all the trees and all the plants, everything that drops down, it feeds the saprophytic fungi, so the different group of fungi, which are the decomposers. So they basically eat organic matter, and they once again take all those nutrients, recycling those nutrients that the plants have. The plants are essentially eating themselves through these processes when you think about it, because there's decomposition of their bodies that are dying, and then the mycorrhizal or the partner fungi, the symbiotic ones, take those nutrients back to the plants. So you can sort of see the circular cyclical nature of the system in the soil. It's constantly like this. This is why soils themselves don't really have much to offer. Once you remove a forest or a garden or clear the land, really within just a couple of years, you can't even farm the land anymore, because everything, all the nutrients and all the minerals and all the vitamins, everything is held in the biological systems. It's not held in a silt, sand and clay, because that's not how it's designed. It's designed to be within the bodies of the organisms themselves.
So it's a long-term gig.
Yes, and this is how it continuously cycles through the plant and all the organisms. So that's where all your life potential is in, and the soil is just like a house or a matrix through which that happens. And the minerals do provide, obviously in the soil, the sand, silt and clay provide the plants with the minerals by the microbial churning of that. So fungi and bacteria can actually access those nutrients. So there's no such thing as a depleted soil, because as long as there's sand or silt or clay that's full of minerals, you just need the biology to access that and feed it directly to the plant. And the only way though that can be actually fed back to the plant is for other organisms like protozoa, nematodes, little creatures, little microscopic creatures that then eat the bacteria and the fungi. And once they poop it out, like literally when they poo, that's exactly what the plant is fertilized with. That's the nutrient source. It's a beautiful system nature has, in place. And if we just understand it and we really love it, like in this case where you really just continually chopping and dropping, that's the best way you can do it. And we can do that on farm systems as well.
But so with our climate change response here in Noosa Shire, we're kind of looking at gardens, backyard gardens, to small farmers to kick this off. What would be your suggestion for a climate change response garden? Well, we know the drought's going to come. We want to feed our plants. We want to grow climate appropriate crops as well. What would be your suggestion then for us?
In terms of the way that you're doing it right now, the chop and drop method, the constant, allowance of it to all do its thing, that's the key, because those microbes that are being fed continuously through the plants and through the dead organic matter that's being dropped, they literally are just holding the soil particles together. They're forming those aggregates in the soil. When this happens, and then you've got also a layer where moisture can't escape much from the soil, because it's all protected by the dead organic matter on top and whatever else you put on there that protects it, you can kind of see it that already we have no water runoff in that situation, because it's all being sponged up. It's literally a living sponge now. And as you do that, the carbon's also continuously staying there, because you're not digging it up to release it, and you're not poisoning it, and you're not. So that is it. It's very, very simple. And the additional thing I would suggest is also to really start feeding the system with additional microbial organisms that you can create through the worm farming system, and especially the flow through worm farm, where you feed it from the top, you don't disturb it, but you harvest from the bottom.
Okay.
And then you can do all kinds of things like extract that and apply it through spraying the biology, because you're literally then creating additional, if you can imagine, you're adding biodiversity to the microbial system.
Yeah.
So whatever it has there, we don't know at the moment. We could test that under the microscope and have a look, but you can always enrich it. And that's what happens in a rainforest situation, where it reaches its pinnacle. It's like the higher the biodiversity, same with the soil, that we want that biodiversity, and that's your climate solution, really. It's called, literally, it's the soil solution.
With the soil solution.
The soil solution, within 15 years, it has been estimated, if farmers around the world got together and just did this, when we stopped spraying, tilling, and actually just helping farmers to create, to cultivate the microbes will do their work for them. They'll have less costs, and at the same time they'll be soil sequestering all the carbon from the soil. So they could be carbon farmers and soil biology farmers instead of, because then everything else is taken care of. It's a very beautiful system.
Okay, I'm going to pull it back down to our level here in our simple community garden. So we have our Olympic gardens there. We have our forest
Food
farm,
forest,
food
yeah.
forest over there. But in the middle here, we sent you some double grind from the tips. And the concept of this
Yes.
is this was a netball court. So we're starting to grow on top of a very, very hard clay substrate.
Yes.
And so you tested this double grind.
Yes.
And what did you think of it? And is this another path forward to?
Totally. Any organic matter we can deliver from elsewhere, as long as it's gone through a process, usually the composting process. And I'm assuming this has gone through some hardy temperature as well, because I don't see any pathogens, and I would imagine there would be normally, because organic waste has all kinds of municipal waste in it, and however it's been processed, it's gone to a point where there's some significant, I would say, because I was quite surprised that it actually does, and it did end up with one of the piles ended up with some biomass of fungi in it and other organisms. There's some key organisms missing that I'll present later in the presentation, but other than that, I think it's a pretty good start. And once again, the suggestion would be to teach people how to create this worm farming system, because the worms are the best farmers of microbes if you feed them correctly, and inoculate that back to once again, a circular economy. You can take some of the waste that is too big or whatever, or you don't need as much, and put that through your worm farm system, and then extract that and put it onto your plants. Not so much the soil. I think what I'm finding that really it's the biome next to the plant. It doesn't have to be a huge scale addition, but at the same time, if you want a whole scale amendment to all of the soil, so that you can have many plants growing and all of them are happy, and weed-free system, might I mention as well, because we're selecting against weeds by having a really good microbiome consortium in the soil and by healthy plants. So no pesticides are needed, and no herbicides are needed, because the plants are healthy, they're not getting attacked by insects. It ticks all the boxes. And so you're talking scale. So that's what we're focusing on. Is we have our little plots here, and then this is a model of what a market garden could be. But going to where you're saying is just a continuous chopping and dropping. So once this gets going and flowing, you kind of have the syntropic trees. You plant taller trees, you chop them down. You actually plant some plants just specifically to chop and drop. Because then you're feeding your microbes from the top, while the plants are feeding them from the bottom, and it's all being churned by the worms. And then you've got this entire system where the biology is spread throughout the system. The plants are choosing which microbes they want to interact with. It's all very much based on communication in the soil, communication between the plants, its microbiome, through this matrix of the soil and the organic matter that's being added. So definitely organic matter is the key, and obviously you already started adding that into your system.
Well, thank you very much,
worries.
Sandra. Thank you for coming up, and we'll see you tonight at the big talk, the big Permaculture Club meeting tonight.
It's going to be fun.
Thank you, Sandra.
Thank you so much for having me.
Cheers.